Jaya Radha Madhava Kundali. It's on the floor, you throw it away. Jaya Radha Madhava Kundali. Gopi Nanamala Pumma Yivanudati. Gopi Nanamala Yivanudati. His Divine Grace Abhaya Charananda Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Vidas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Gadadhara Sivasati Gaur Shri Shri Radha Krishna Govinda Sayam Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavanam ki jai, Vrindavanam ki jai, Jai Goswami ki jai, Manamai ki jai. Shrimati Lasi Devi ki jai, Samveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityananda. Namaste Saraswati Devi, Gauravadi Charni Nivashesha, Shunyavadi Pasyacha Desha Tarne. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, second chapter, text 31. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Toya Vilasiteshu Eshu Guneshu Gunavan Iva Anta Pravishta Abhati Vijnanena Vishambitaha Toya Vilasiteshveshu Guneshu Gunavaniva Anta Pravishta Bhavati Vijnanena Vishambita Toya Vilasiteshveshu. The V and the E, they run into each other. Like, just figure they're like one word. Vilasiteshveshu. So that's how you say it. Guneshu Gunavaniva. Anta Pravishtaha Bhati Yanena Vishrimbita Taya Vilasiteshveshu Guneshu Gunavaniva Anta Pravishtaha Bhati Yanena Vijambita. Okay. All right. Taya, by them. Vilasiteshu Although in the function, Eshu, these, Guneshu, the modes of material nature, Gunavan, affected by the modes, Eva, as if, Anta, within, Pravishta, entered into, Abhati, appears to be, Vijnanena, by transcendental consciousness, Vijnanvita, fully enlightened. Translation: after creating the material substance, the Lord, Vasudeva, expands himself and enters into it. And although he is within the material modes of nature and appears to be one of the created beings, he is always fully enlightened in his transcendental position. So, purport: by his divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The living entities are separated parts and parcels of the Lord, and the conditioned living entities who are unfit for the spiritual kingdom are strewn within the material world to enjoy matter to the fullest extent. As Paramatma, an eternal friend of the living entities, the Lord, by one of his plenary portions, accompanies the living entities to guide them in their material enjoyment and to become witness to all activities. While the living entities enjoy the material conditions, the Lord maintains his transcendental position without being affected by the material atmosphere. In the Vedic literature of Shruti, it is said that there are two birds in one tree. One of them is eating the fruit of the tree while the other is witnessing the actions. The witness is the Lord, and the fruit eater is the living entity. The fruit eater, living entity, has forgotten his real identity and is overwhelmed in the fruit of activities and the material conditions. But Lord Paramatma is always full in transcendental knowledge. That is the difference between the supersoul and the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul, the living entity, is controlled by the laws of nature, while the Paramatma, or the supersoul, is the controller of material energy. So again, Kayamilashiteshveshu Guneshu Gunavaniva Antakpravictabhati Vijnanena Vishrimbita. So Om Gana Timidandasha Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So of course what's being described here is what we know as the super soul, or the Paramatma. Now the Paramatma is an expansion of the Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. So first you got, as you all know, first you got the Mahavishnu, who is the first of the Purusha avatars, specific type of avatar. Avatar, actually, the word avatar means someone who crosses down. So you have Mahavishnu, who breathes out and all the universes come out from him. And then he is like the super soul of the total material creation. Okay. Where do you go? And then, after that, you have the Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. Garbha means like a womb. So who enters into each and every universe, and he is the super soul of the universe. So they're actually different super souls. He's the universal super soul. And then after that, you have the expansion of the Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. And Kshirodakshaya Vishnu is quite interesting because he resides, in addition to in everyone's heart, he resides on the Dvip, which is actually an island in the Milk Ocean. You've heard about this before? And so whenever there's a trouble in the universe, the demigods, especially Lord Brahma, go to the shore of the Milk Ocean and they pray and they get a message, and the incarnations come in this way from the Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, which is actually quite interesting. So basically, almost all the avatars except for Krishna, they're expanding from the Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. And of course, Krishna is not an expansion from the Kshirodakshaya Vishnu because Eti Chamsa Paramsa. Krishna is to Bhagavan Swayam. He's the source of all incarnations. So first you have Krishna, and then you have Balaram, Sankarshan, Aniruddha, and that's the first quadruple expansion. Then you have Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Prajuna, Aniruddha, and also when Lord Ram appears, you have Ram, you have Lakshman, Bharat, and Shatrughna. So this is called the Chaturvyuha expansions. So all these personalities, regardless of what their name is, they're all the same person, which is interesting. So it's not that Paramatma is a different God. It's not that we are polytheistic, right? We're polytheistic. It's not that we believe in many gods. We have Paramatma, we worship him, we worship Lord Ram, we worship Krishna, we worship Nrsimhadev, we worship Balaram, we worship Kurma, we worship Matsya, we worship all these different incarnations. In fact, there's as many avatars or incarnations Prabhupada describes as waves of the ocean. In other words, they're unlimited. So we understand, according to Lord Brahma's statement in the Brahma Samhita, Dvaita Chuta Anadir Anadarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navyoganam Cha Vedeshu Durlavam Adurlavam Atmabhaktu Govindamani Purusham Tamaham Shami. Advaita, there is one God, but he manifests himself differently in different circumstances. That's all. Very simple. And he manifests himself differently in different circumstances that can all be done simultaneously, like you have Bharat, Lakshman, Lord Ramchandra, Shatrughna, all together in one place, and they're all the same person. That's amazing. Of course, sometimes it's described that different expansions of the Lord represent different weapons. Like you have the Chaturvyuha, they represent the Shank and the Chakra, like this, and the Padma, the different weapons and symbols of the Supreme Personality of God. So that's also another way of looking at it. But they're all the same person. There's not many gods. So Paramatma and Krishna are the same person, but Krishna manifests in a certain way as Paramatma. And Paramatma realization, just Paramatma realization, or that realization of that aspect of the Lord, is partial realization. As described in the Bhagavatam, Vedanti tattva viras tattvam yadgyanamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdate. The absolute truth is understood in three phases. You probably know this already. Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. And each of those three phases indicate a certain type of realization. In the Brahman realization, you realize the eternal aspect of the Lord, Sat. In the Paramatma realization, you have the Chit, that is knowledge. With that knowledge is, Vasudeva Sarvameti. But still, that's not the ultimate realization, because you don't have, in Paramatma realization, you don't have the bliss, or the ecstasy, or the bhava, or the ras. And so that's only their Bhagavan realization. So then, what function does the Paramatma perform? This is really interesting subject matter. And the Bhagavad Gita deals with this quite extensively in the 15th chapter 18th chapter and the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. 3 of the chapters. Of course, there's only one verse in the 18th chapter that talks about Paramatma, and 15th chapter, basically one verse. So I'll explain those verses. In the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, I believe it's 1861, Ishwara Sarvabhutanam Hridesha Arjuna Tishtiti Brahmayan Sarvabhutane Yantra Rudani Maya, which is really an interesting verse. So there's Ishwara, so that's Paramatma. Sarvabhutanam, he's within every living entity. But where is he within? Hridesha Arjuna. He's within the heart, Arjuna. Tishtati, situated. Brahmayan Sarvabhutane. And so the living entity is wandering. Brahmayan Sarvabhutane. Yantra Rudani Maya. And he's on this machine of the material energy. In other words, he's identified with the machine of the material energy. And he's wandering from one machine to another, identifying himself as one machine. This is also stated in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is actually really interesting. That Brahmanda Brahmate Kona Bhagavan Jiva Guru Krishna Prasade Bhai Bhakti Lata Beach, the living entity is wandering, and by the mercy of Paramatma, the mercy of Krishna, he gets Guru. And by the mercy of Guru, he gets Krishna. It's interesting. I mean, they work together, Guru and Krishna. Guru Krishna Prasade Bhai Bhakti Lata Beach. So he gets the creeper of devotion from the Guru, and that gives him Krishna. So it's interesting. So this verse states that he's directing Ishwara Sarvabhuta Hridesha Arjuna. He's directing the wanderings of the living entity who are seated on the machine made of the material energy. And so, therefore, you may come to the conclusion, just by reading this one particular verse, that Paramatma is responsible for your suffering or enjoyment in this material world, or your, what you're doing. It's not my fault. Paramatma made me do it. You hear this sometimes? But actually, in the 15th chapter of the Gita, the famous verse we have, the very famous, Matak Spritir Gyanam Apovanamcha, that I am situated in the heart. Krishna says, I'm in the heart of the living entities. Sarvasya Chahamani son of Vishnu, Matak Spritir Gyanam Apovanamcha, Vedai Shastabha Ramani Vedu, Vanantakrit Vedit Ved Chaha. I'm seated on the heart of every living entity. Sarvasya Chaham, Riddhi, again, Riddhi, or heart. Son of Vishnu, that means, again, situated. And Matak Smriti or Jnanaponam Cha, I'm giving remembrance, forgetfulness, and knowledge according to the living entity's desire. So in other words, Paramatma, or super soul, in our heart, is not really controlling us, but he's controlling us to the extent that when we desire something, he gives us intelligence, the ability, the memory, and even forgetfulness to carry out our particular desire. For example, if you want to be, hopefully you don't, for example, if you want to be an atheist, then Paramatma will give you the atheistic philosophy, because that's your desire. You want to forget Krishna? Okay. Here's the methodology to forget Krishna. And so, therefore you get this nonsense philosophy. Ye tamam prabhajante tam sataiva bhajamaya. Mamavart manavartante anushapartha sarvasha. That Krishna says that everyone follows my path. I'm reciprocating with everyone. As they give to me or approach me, I approach them. So Krishna's not directing you in the sense like forcing you like a robot to act in a certain way. In fact, Later on in the Gita, it's described that Krishna is equal to everybody. He gives everybody equal facility to forget or remember. Samoham sarvabhuteshu, name dvaishosti napriha. Krishna is equal to everyone. So everything is based upon desire, which is interesting. 15th chapter of the Gita also we find the banyan tree, which is actually based on desire, which is interesting. So you got this desire of the living entity. Your desire is the reason you are acting, you are thinking, you are believing in a certain way. And Krishna also says if one desires to devote himself to a particular type of deity other than himself, Krishna makes that person's faith strong. So not only does he give intelligence, remembrance, forgetfulness, but he gives faith, he gives ability, as Krishna says, on the ability of man. He gives intelligence, we already described intelligence of the intelligent, strength of the strong, etc. Strength. So all these things come from Krishna. So we are actually responsible for our situation. Our actions, our situations, our mental situation too. So we cannot blame God or blame Maya. Sometimes we blame Maya. Like the Christians, they have this way of blaming Maya. They say, the devil made me do it. Well, the devil didn't make you do it. You made yourself do it. Now, actually, and then also in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, I have the 13th chapter here on my little device. The 13th chapter, there's more information about the Paramatma. And of course, the 13th chapter of the Gita is done nature, enjoyer, and consciousness. And so, the question is like, who is the knower in all the bodies? So he is the ultimate knower. So in the, 13th chapter, 13th chapter, verse 3, Krishna says that I am the knower of in all bodies. So Krishna is the Kshetragya. You understand? Kshetragya. Kshetragya means the knower of the fields, basically. And the field happens to be the body. So Krishna knows exactly what's happening in each and every body. Of course, Krishna is not experiencing the pain you have. It's not that every time you hurt yourself, Krishna is in pain. But he knows, he's aware of everything in every body. And the super soul, later on in the 13th chapter, I think it's the 14th verse, it's described how he's all pervasive. It says, everywhere his hands and legs, his eyes, heads, and faces, and he has ears everywhere. In this way, the super soul exists, pervading everything. So that's also interesting for us, because generally we think we can get away with something and nobody's watching us. And super soul is watching us. His eyes and ears are everywhere. Sometimes people get nervous if you go into a place and there's security cameras. Security cameras? Oh, so I'm being watched. Can you imagine if we put security cameras in the Brahmachari ashram? Everybody get nervous about it. Oh my God, I better behave myself. So, but Krishna has security cameras everywhere. He's everywhere. He's watching every single thing you do. And he's conveying that information to Yamaraj. Sometimes it's described, certain verses describe that Yamaraj is omniscient. Well, he's not omniscient in the same, omniscient means to see everything and understand everything, and not a blade of grass moves without the Lord's will and without the Lord's knowledge. But Yamaraj is omniscient because he's connected to Super Soul. Sometimes it's described that the pure devotee is Trikala Gya. Trikala Gya means he knows past, present, and future. Well, he's that way because he's connected to Super Soul, but he's not directly omniscient. pure devotee is not directly omniscient. He gets the information from Supersoul whenever Supersoul or Krishna directly gives him that information. So, anyway, so this is a very important point. He's everywhere, he's pervading everything, he's aware of everything continually. And then the next verse of the Gita, in the 13th chapter, says, he's the source of all of our senses, yet he's without material senses. He is unattached, although he is the maintainer of the living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time, he is the master of all the modes of material nature. In the 16th verse, in the 13th chapter, basically the same thing. He exists outside and inside of all living beings, moving and non-moving. Because he is subtle, he is beyond the power of the material senses to see or to know. Although far, far away, he is also near to all. And that's explained in the 17th verse. Although the Supersoul appears to be divided among all beings, he is never divided. He is situated as one. Although he is the maintainer of every living entity, it is to be understood that he devours and envelops all. So what does that mean? Prabhupada gives the example in the purport. That means that like the sun is in one place, and then you see the manifestation of the sun in various reflections. Do you understand? So you could say the sun is on the lake or in the water. And one sense you're right. Or sometimes Prabhupada gives the example, let the sun shine in, but you're not letting the sun in. You're letting the sun shine in. So in the same way, Paramatma is transcendentally situated and he doesn't touch the material energy. You know, sometimes we think that he's floating around within the heart region. His manifestation is there within the heart region. It's a projection, his manifestation, but he's not touching matter. In the same way, the soul doesn't touch matter. We can't. The soul is non-material. A non-material thing cannot touch a material thing. But a non-material thing, the soul, can identify itself, himself, herself, as a material thing, but they can't touch it. So our illusion is such that even though we think we are this body and we're experiencing everything from this body, we are not actually touching the body. It's just an illusion. The connection between us and this body is simply an illusion. That's Maya, Krishna's energy. So, and then the 18th verse, I just found it interesting, all these descriptions of the Super Soul in the 13th chapter of the Gita. He is the source of light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. He is knowledge, object of knowledge, and the goal of knowledge, and he's situated in everyone's heart. And then going to the 23rd verse, this is actually important in regard to today's purport. Yet in this body, there's another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the Supreme Proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the Super Soul. So in other words, we should see him as the enjoyer rather than ourselves. And then in the 25th verse, there's a different methodologies of perceiving or seeing or contacting or understanding the Super Soul. Some perceive the Super Soul within themselves through meditation, others through cultivation of knowledge, and still others through working without fruitive desires. So in other words, you have some yogis who meditate and they ultimately see the Super Soul, and others can actually see the Super Soul by understanding, cultivation of knowledge, and others can see the Supersoul by working in bhakti, which is without fruit of desires. So, and then one who sees, next verse, not next verse, actually 28th verse. One who sees the Supersoul accompanying the individual soul in all bodies, and who understands that neither the soul nor the Supersoul within the destructible body is ever destroyed, actually sees. And verse 29, one who sees the Supersoul equally present everywhere in every living being does not degrade himself by his mind. Thus he approaches the transcendental destination, and that's the ultimate point in the 13th chapter of the Gita, that one sees yastu sarvani bhutani atmanai evanu pashati sarvabhutesha chatmanam tatovana vikagupshate. One sees everybody connected with the Supersoul, everybody equal, and therefore one doesn't have any enemies, according to that's the verse from the Upanishad. One doesn't have any enemies, and one becomes a well-wisher of all living entities. So by understanding, the conclusion is by understanding the Supersoul through these various means mentioned in the 13th chapter of the Gita, precisely, or for us, that means through Bhakti Yoga, then one can come to the proper understanding of compassion and love for all living entities, seeing all living entities as one's brothers and sisters, which Prabhupada termed as first-class God consciousness. So, anyway, so these are some of the points from today's verse. Any questions or comments? So if you're interested, further interested, read the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. When I first became a devotee, the 13th chapter of the Gita was a little bewildering for me. Nature, enjoyer, and consciousness. I was talking about Kshetra, Kshetragya. I was saying, oh my God, what's happening here? But after a while it became clear that they were talking about the soul, the Supersoul, the body is the Kshetra, and then how to perceive the Supersoul, and who the Supersoul is, and what happens when you actually see the Supersoul in everybody, how you're compassionate with everybody, and how Supersoul is watching you at every minute, and how Supersoul is giving you intelligence, forgetfulness, and knowledge. So 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is an extremely important chapter. You understand? Even though it comes after the 12th chapter. The reason I'm saying that is that in the Bhagavad Gita, you have the chapters divided 6 and 6 and 6. You understand? Everybody knows this? 6, 6, and 6. And the middle 6 are described as the nectar chapters. Like the essence, like you have a sandwich. You got the bread and the filling in the sandwich, or like we used to have these cookies where you had a cream filling in the cookie. And the outside, you just tolerated the outside of the cookie. So, but even though it's described like that, the whole Bhagavad Gita is nectarian. I mean, I understand the 12th chapter is especially nice that comes before the 13th, because that's devotional service. But it's really, I don't know, it's really deep. It's not that we should avoid or minimize the other chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. And the 13th chapter is just filled with so much nice information. Of course, 14 too. I particularly like 16th chapter. What's the 16th chapter? You don't know what the 16th chapter is? Have you studied Bhagavad Gita? What's the name of the 16th chapter? Divine and demoniac natures. I particularly like that, because I get to hear about the demons, who are quite interesting. Maybe that shows I'm not so much of a devotee. I like to hear Prabhatim Cha Nivartim Cha Navidura Asura. You should learn the names of the chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. You know the Bhagavad Gita? That's a book spoken by Krishna. So, anybody have any questions? Yes, over there.
This
Karana Daksha, Govardhana.
The Paramatma, which is in our
Hearts.
That's
That's Shirodakshaya Vishnu.
So that same Shivadakshaya Vishnu is the one who comes as incarnation.
Yeah.
So the same, so he divides himself into quadruples. Sankarshan divides himself into quadruples.
Yeah, there's the first expansion, second expansion, it goes on.
So who is seated in our heart? Is it
Shirodakshaya Vishnu.
the Shivadakshaya?
No, but if you're a devotee of Ram is situated. The interesting thing is that depending on who one's Ishta Devata is, let's say if you go to Hanuman, it's not that Shirodakshaya Vishnu is situated in Hanuman's heart. He has Sita and Ram in his heart. So for the pure devotee, let's say, okay, let's talk about Srila Prabhupada, then of course I'm not going to speculate on Prabhupada's relationship. But, he has Lord Chaitanya and Radha Krishna in his heart. So, Chaitanya, just like we were telling the story the other day about this devotee, Hridaya Chaitanya. Hridaya Chaitanya, Lord Chaitanya jumped into his heart. So I don't think there's a four-handed form manifest anymore. I think that would be Lord Chaitanya in his heart. So, because basically, as Advaita, Chuta, Nadi, Paramatma, all these different expansions and Chaturvyuha, second Chaturvyuha, third Chaturvyuha, they're all the same person. Prabhupada gives the example of a man who goes to the office, he acts in a certain way, dresses in a certain way, he comes home. He's the same person, but he looks a lot different, acts a lot different, has different types of relationships. So just like we say, Krishna in Vrindavan is Krishna at home. And then you have the Mahavishnu or Shirodakshaya Vishnu. There's like Krishna at the office or something. Not exactly, but just to give you an example, he's the same person, but he acts differently in different circumstances. So Krishna wants to matter, just like, here's a story from Raj pastimes. Krishna one time wanted to hide out from the gopis, so he made himself 4 arms. He was Paramatma, or he was Shirodakshaya, whatever, Lord Vishnu. He was Lord Vishnu. He's called Chaturbhuj, 4 arms. And so then what happens is that Radharani comes, and he's not able to keep the extra 2 arms because of her bhav, because of her emotion. So if you're devoted to Lord Ram, then Paramatma, then Krishna will appear as Lord Rama in your heart. It's not. Anyway, Lord Ram is your Paramatma. Pretty nice. And if you're devoted to Rama, no, not really. Anyway, so it's interesting. Yes, so it's the same. The Shirodakshaya Vishnu on the shore of in the Shredded Dweep, the island Shredded Dweep, which is on the shore of the Milk Ocean. That's the same as Paramatma in the heart, Shirodakshaya, and he's the one from whom the expansions in the world come. Holy, but not Krishna and Balaram. Krishna and Balaram do not come from Shirodakshaya Vishnu. Shirodakshaya Vishnu, that's spoken in the Bhagavatam, Ete Chansla Kalakpum Sad Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is the original. All right. So, anybody else have questions?
Because the strong desire that we have in the heart, so we suffer and enjoy it.
Strong desire what?
Strong desire we have in the heart, so we suffer and enjoy it.
Yeah.
We can say it's
Strong desire, your desires, right.
So we can say that it's related to the past based on experience. That's why we have this desire.
we could say what? Because of the past? No, no, no. It's because Karanam Gunasangasha Sanasad Janma Jonishu. You pick your association. By good association, the demon can become a devotee. And by bad association, a devotee can become a demon. Like, there are stories like Krishna's son, Boma, who became Bhaumasura by bad association, or by committing offenses. Then you had Vidvita Gorilla and Minda, who offended Lakshman during Lord Ramchandra's pastimes. Then they became demoniac. So you can see, people can change, devotees can change by Karanam Gunasangasya Sadasatya Majonisa, by association with the modes of nature. So everything is based upon association in this world, or spiritually. Everything's based upon association. You have satsanga, and then you become, Mahat Seva Mahura Muktesh. You associate with a great soul, and then you get liberated. Or sadhu sangha, sarva sada, sangha, sarva sastra koi, lavamatra sadhu sangha, sarva siddhi hoy. Everything's based on association. You pick your association. You're responsible. You can't say, well, it's because of my past samskaras. I was born with a samskara of a demon. That's just an excuse. That's called Prabhupada called that the naked mother philosophy. Because your mother was naked now, when she was born. Why should she wear clothes now? It's crazy. You are responsible. Whatever you came from, Dina hina yatu chilo, harinan mudurilo. Tara sakshai jagai madai. Look at the evidence of Jagai Madai. Jagadananda Madhavananda. Look what happened. And there's so many other stories where demons actually became devotees, or devotees became demoniac. You even see that nowadays, that you have devotees who join the movement, they're very, very sincere and dedicated, and then they go on the internet and they take bad association, and then they start criticizing other Vaishnavas. Their whole life becomes dedicated to criticize, and then they fall down in devotional service. So association is everything. Okay? Other questions or comments? Actually, it is time right now. Questions, comments, arguments?
I remember that time they used to come, and at the same time, things were coming out in the net on YouTube, etc. The Gurudev said, warning, not to enter into those sites.
Yeah.
Even not out of curiosity, not even a moment, you must totally avoid it, just like you avoid the Maya houses.
Yeah.
Totally. And then he gave us all the instructions. Even myself now, I don't even try and go to this site. I was going with my really easily in my mind. Not even a moment to go to those sites.
Yeah, it's just a waste of time. And the worst thing is, yes, you read these things, and then you try to argue with them. People try to defend the Vaishnavas, and then it gets worse. People get so nasty on the internet. So it's better to avoid these different things. There's bad association. There's bad association everywhere. Look what happened to Ajamil. He meditated, he contemplated, and by bad association with, the modes of nature, his thoughts, he actually fell down. Of course, later on he was saved. Okay, I think it's more than time, so we should end. Thank you very much. All glories to His Divine Grace. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Goranga. Okay. Tara Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace, Abhaya Charanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya, Srila